So in this episode of our Rewind, we're going to look at the NumGame or GuessGame Visual Basic Script email worm. Now this is kind of an interesting little Visual Basic Script worm on here, and we see it's about a 12.6 kilobyte file. And again, it's an email worm, so you would get this in an email with some kind of an attachment on it. Usually it will either come as an HTML or a .vbe file like this is here. And I'll explain the thing with the HTML file in a second. So you would get it in an email, and we'll see what the subject and body of the email looks like when we get to the script code. But you would generally get this as an HTML file attached to the email, and when you open it, it would present a dialog box telling you some kind of a set of instructions that say where you need to put this file, and then it would tell you that if there was any kind of ActiveX warning dialog box you got from Internet Explorer when you tried opening it, to go ahead and click yes. Now of course if your security settings were low enough you wouldn't get a dialog box, but if you did get one, it instructed you to say yes, and then it would use ActiveX to run the Visual Basic Script code for the email worm. So let's look at that now. So we're going to bring up Notepad here with it loaded, and as you see, one of the first things here is that we get a configuration. I'm trying to look at the camera here to make sure it's okay. It looks good. So we get the GuessGame configuration, so it allows us to adjust the range of numbers that it can go to and how many tries we've got. So you can tell it goes from 1 to 100 by default and gives us up to 10 guesses. And then we get into the coding, and we get these file names: GuessGame.vbe, GuessGame.vbs, and GuessGame.bat. These will come into play later. Scroll down some, and then we get into the main functions. So the first thing it's going to do is create a copy. This is where it's going to create a copy of all the code that you see here in this VBE file, basically the core of the email worm. Then it's got a security section which is specifically for Outlook, which apparently from what I saw in the code, it looks like, and again from the name, it probably has something to do with monitoring the security of Outlook at certain intervals, I guess, for trying to be able to attach itself and send emails. And then we've got the email sending routine, which is right there, and then it's got an interesting one where for some reason it sets the computer date to April 8th, 1981. I'm not sure exactly what the relevance of that is for, but maybe somebody knows what April 8th, 1981 is there for. Maybe it's the virus author's birth date, who knows. And then it's actually got the virus payload that comes in, and then the actual guessing game part, and then that's the end of the worm. So the first one we get here is our guessing game, which is what the email worm is named for. So it declares a whole bunch of certain items, and then it sets an integer for the random number ranging from 1 to 100. Sets all the variables, then presents us with a message box asking us that they have thought of a number ranging from 1 to whatever the range is. In this case it's 100. Then it gives us all the code for the tries and determining if it's right or not. So if we guess the correct number, it gives us a message box that we are a winner and what the number was. And then if we get it wrong, it tells us a loser and then what the number was, and then tells us what the guess is. If it's too high, it tells us if it's too low, and then if we try to enter too big of a number or a letter or some kind of invalid input, it will tell us that the input's wrong. And then after it's done with the number of tries, or if we get it right, it asks us if we want to play again with a yes or no. And then if we say no, it continues on in the list. If we say yes, it just repeats this whole section again. But again, this section occurs last in the email worm's coding. To continue on down, they have create a copy. So what this does is it looks for the Windows system folder. This is what get special folder 1 means, and we'll see this later. Get special folder 0 is the Windows directory, 1 is the system directory, 2 is the Windows temp directory. So we'll see those later on. So this is looking to put a copy of itself in the Windows system directory. So it does some reading operations, and then it creates the file as a .vbe, so it creates again a whole copy of everything in the VBE file here that we're looking at, named as GuessGame.vbe. Then it writes it, and then it continues on. And now we get into the security tab, and this is an interesting one. It creates another file, and again it's creating this in the Windows system directory as well, and this is a .vbs file, so this is going to be GuessGame.vbs, and it's just going to have the code from this section here. As we see, it's looking for the app activation, so it's looking to see if Outlook is either not running, or in the case here, if it is running. And then it looks like it tries to send us keys like A or Y, so maybe abort or yes for confirmation, and then it lets the script sleep for a few seconds and then continues monitoring it again under certain conditions, if it's open or closed, open or closed. And part of the reason too, I think, for this is that it tries to email silently in the background. So we don't have Outlook set up on here yet, so it will try to ask us to set it up first, so we'll know that it's trying to do mass emailing. So then here's the email section that we just scrolled down, and it gives us all the variables for Outlook and the folders and attachments. So it gives us another set of declarations, and here again is where we see the Windows system and temp directories all declared. So as I said, special folder 0 is Windows, 1 is system, and 2 is temp. Oops, accidentally hit a key and went back to the top here. Get rid of that. Come back down. Okay, now we're back at the emails. So it looks for 10 contacts in the Outlook folder that it can acquire. And you see it's also monitoring a whole bunch of other folders, like the All Users Desktop folder, the Regular User Desktop folder, My Documents, and a couple of other things, and we'll see this all play later. And we can see this is the attachment sections. So it attaches itself as GuessGame.html, which again is what I was saying. It originally comes as an HTML file that gives you the dialog box when you first open it, and then prompts you to confirm the ActiveX so that it can run its script and infect your system. And then, of course, this is for each contact, so this is the actual emails that it sends. So it adds its attachments, and then it puts the subject line, RU, full name, so this would be your username, my Valentine. So if I was like using my username mouseoffb, for instance, it would say RU mouseoffb my Valentine, or probably the email name, whichever one it's got there. And then the body says hi, and then he puts his name in there again, my Valentine. Remember me? I ain't seen you in ages. Anyway, check out and play the attached Guess the Number game to guess who I am. See you soon. Bye bye. And then it sends the email. And then it goes on to the next one till it does all 10. Then it gets to the date section. This one I don't quite understand what the point of it is, aside from changing the date to April 8th, 1981. But it creates a batch file. So it says GuessGame.bat, which only has the lines date, %1, and clear screen. And then I guess it attempts to run it. I guess in certain systems that affects the date in a certain way, but it doesn't really seem to do much on here. However, I think and we'll see this when we run it, I believe the email worm gets hung up here on this, which is part of the coding, because this worm actually has a problem that kind of prevents it from working fully, and I believe this is where it's getting hung up at, is this section. Again, we'll see that when we run the worm. So here's the virus part of it, and it is a destructive email worm because it pretty much trashes the system when it gets to this point. So we'll see it's looking for shell stuff, so it's looking for stuff on the computer, but it also looks at the network. So it's going to try to spread onto any network drives it can find. So again, here's all our special folder declarations again, and then it's looking at the all users desktop, all user program, desktop programs by decade. So it's looking in pretty much every possible folder it can find for any files that it can delete. And then it's also again looking for any network drives it can spread on, along with the local drives on the computer. Then it writes 2 registry keys here. Now both of these registry keys are set up. So this first one here is the system file checker disable for Windows NT. So it disables that so you cannot see any system file checker dialogues popping up telling you, hey, something's going wrong with your system here, we're losing files. And then the second one here disables the Windows desktop. So your desktop will no longer be accessible with that registry key. And below it here, you can see all the various, again, declarations for programs in this array, and then it's got a whole bunch of different file extensions that it's looking for to delete. So dynamic link libraries, dat files, .com, DOS programs, portable executables, cabinet files, INI configuration files. Let's see, Word documents, VXD drivers, regular drivers, Excel documents, Access databases, PowerPoints, MP3 music files, JPEG pictures, text documents, HTML and HTML web files, HJ configurations, and ASP and ASPX. So pretty much tries to delete everything. And it's also got another little registry entry here as well for install locations for where software is, like Internet Explorer, Microsoft Office, Windows, ODBC, and other things. And once it has all of that information, then you can see it starts deleting the files. So it gets all the directory information from the previous sections, and then for every file it finds, it runs a deletion command. And then for the directories, it attempts to delete all the subdirectories as well. So not only does it try to delete all the files it can, it tries to delete all the directories it can too. And then we get to the part where it's doing network drives. Well, it does the same thing with network drives. If you've got network shares attached to the computer, depending on the permissions, it will attempt to wipe out those network drives as well. Continue scrolling down. And again, more deletes files there. So if those things don't get enough, well, then it's got another little section kind of for redundancy to delete even more files and directories. And then it's got an interesting section here where it creates an autoexec.bat file. So basically an autoexec batch file with, again, more commands and del tree with the Y switch. So if for some reason it doesn't completely wipe out your system, well, if your system is somehow still bootable, the next time it tries to boot, it will load this autoexec.bat with all these deletion commands with del tree and try to wipe your system out that way. So this email worm has some redundancy built into it. See, there's the autoexec.bat declaration there. And I believe that's pretty much it after that. And again, after it trashes your system, then it tries to run its GuessGame game, which is actually, again, what the script is named after. Not going to say the changes. So come back in a minute and so we're now going to run the GuessGame Visual Basic script, and we'll take note of the computer's date here. So it's kind of set for October 20th, which is actually in the future because it's really October 11th right now, but we'll see this date change, and I will keep Notepad open because we're going to need to look at some stuff later, and it won't get deleted if we leave it open. So let's double click and execute the code. So it's gotten to its emailing routine, and at this point it's already run through setting the security, and it's made its copies of itself, which we can see real quick in the system folder if I jump over there real quick. So system. And again, as I said earlier, Outlook hasn't been set up, so that's why it's asking me. And Outlook actually quit because I guess I didn't answer it in time, so it just shut itself down. May have actually just gone right past it. Alright, I know it's dropped its files. Where are they? There they are. See, we have GuessGame.vbe and GuessGame.vbs. Now, it has not dropped the batch file there because this is at the point in the code where it's trying to make that batch file. And this is where the code gets hung up, which is kind of the bug that I was talking about that doesn't quite allow it to execute correctly, because as you can tell, we are not at the actual guessing numbers game yet. So let me go to Task Manager, and you see this little task here. You can see that the Windows scripting host for Visual Basic Script is running, but there's another process here called Winoldap. Now this is Winoldap.386, which I believe is actually here in the Windows System folder as well. Let's see if I can find it here. And what Winoldap.386 is for is that it's intended for running non-Windows kind of MS-DOS based stuff. And again, because it's a batch file, it's trying to make use of MS-DOS, and you even see MS-DOS mentioned in that little section that it's trying to run like now. So it comes off of this Winoldap.386.mod. So this is the thing in question that it's trying to make use of, but I think it gets hung up because of that date %1. It doesn't know what to do with that line, and I'm not even sure what it was trying to accomplish. And so again, this code gets hung up there and it doesn't proceed. So if we restart the computer now or anything, we're not going to lose any data, nor are we ever going to see the guessing game. But we want to see the guessing game. We also want to see the whole viral payload take place. So bring up Task Manager and pay attention to the system folder, our desktop, and start menu and everything else. Oh, before I do that, we should have set the date as well. See, Wednesday, April 8th, 1981. So yes, it has changed the computer date. So we're going to terminate the Winoldap process, and that's going to allow the script to continue running through its process, and we're going to see lots of file deletion, and then we're going to see the guessing game. So I close Winoldap. There's a bunch of hard drive activity taking place right now. You may even be able to hear the hard drive clicking as it's running its file deletion payload. And when that payload is complete, we should get the numbers game prompt. And see, it's trying to access the floppy drive, and it's trying to go back to GuessGame.bat, which does not exist. And here we are. Guess game. I have thought of a number ranging from 1 to 100. You have 10 tries to guess it. And I don't know, but all the sound effects are gone on the computer. If anybody was noticing the sound effects, well, there's no sound effects now. Click on the desktop, or I should say I refresh the desktop, and it says, whoops, see Windows all users desktop is not accessible. The folder was moved or removed. And it goes gray, because again, that registry entry has been set that disables the desktop. We look at our start menu. So you see our start menu looks a little smaller. We don't have our little office shortcuts above it. We have no programs, no favorites, no documents. We can bring control panel, but nothing is there because the control panel applet has been deleted. Let's refresh system. System has a lot less stuff in here. Of course, the file that it dropped systray is still there. It has to, of course, remove the original systray, but lots of everything else is gone. The only thing left here is this GuessGame.bat. You see we lost everything in Windows there. We still have Notepad because, again, I kept Notepad open so that way it couldn't delete it. And then it has dropped AutoExec.bat here, which is modified. Let's open that. And now you see all these @echo-off commands. It tells it to change to the root directory C and then delete all these files of various extensions. And then it goes through the desktop, start menu, programs, documents, Windows, Windows System, System32, Windows Command, INF config file storage, sysbackup, my documents, documents and settings, program files, and then at the end it uses a whole bunch of delete trees if that didn't do enough already. And like I said, you may have been hearing the floppy drive activate earlier. If there was a floppy disk in there, it would have tried to overwrite the AutoExec.bat file on it with this, supposedly to, I guess, also try to erase files on a floppy disk. Or if you run it in another computer, it will execute this and try to erase the hard disk on that computer. And again, it also searches all network drives as well to try to delete files on those, and then also put this AutoExec.bat file on those as well, if those are shared computers, so that when they start up, they run that corrupted AutoExec.bat file and delete those systems. Now, we do have a backup partition on here, but it doesn't affect anything on it. Everything on this backup partition is still here. Wonder, nope, it didn't put anything on the RAM drive. So let's go ahead and play the guessing game. So, number from 1 to 100, and I have 10 tries, so let's try 5. Okay, so the number's obviously bigger than that. Let's try 76. That's too big, so we go smaller. 47. Too small, so I need to go bigger. How about 51? There's the keyboard getting in my way. Oh, too small. 54. That's still too small. 55. Too small. 56. Too small. 58. Too small. That's 61. Oh, that's also too small. 63. Nope, I'm a loser. The number was 71. And then it asks to play again. If I say yes, well, obviously it's not going to work because the Windows scripting host is gone, and it just tells it to reload that part there. So we can't rerun the game again. And of course, if we click no, it just exits out of the script. So your computer is basically hosed at this point after running the GuessGame.bat. So it would have found 10 contacts in your Outlook, sent that email with the text. See, it's still trying to occasionally run it there. In fact, it's actually rerunning the whole code again. That's interesting what it's doing. So yeah, your computer would be pretty much hosed. It would have emailed it to 10 people with that HTML version of its attachment, and then they'd run it, and then this would happen on their computers too. Oops, and there was the invalid input because, again, the keyboard on this acts up. And see, now I'm a winner because I guessed the correct number, 41. Say no, and that should exit out of the script entirely. So yeah, if you close out of Windows, you'll get an invalid system disk message, and you'll basically have to restore the computer. Let's go ahead and do that now, just for the sake of it. Got the virus disk still on the drive, and invalid system disk. So you pretty much have to restore your computer at this point. So that's basically it for the NumGame GuessGame Visual Basic Script email worm.